people back from lunch. And if not, I'm sure the others will just be hot on our heels. They'll be with us any minute. Great. Okay. Hopefully everybody got a little bit of a break, something to eat, have a bit of a stretch and a move around. It's not good for you all this sitting in one position for too long. Right. I will move us on now. So we are ahead of schedule, which is good news. We might be able to gift you some time back at the end of the meeting. We are on item number 9. So this is our Q4 whistleblowing report, and I will invite Gareth to take us through this one, if that's okay. Gareth, over to you.
Yeah, no problem at all. So in line with our requirements to report on whistleblowing on a quarterly basis, this is the final quarter of the financial year, covering the period from the 1st of February to 31st of March 2024, and against the performance against the standards, which were in place since 2021. Further background in the paper related to the policy and the process. In this period, we've had 3 new cases raised. 1 monitor referral remains under review, and 1 case arising from an independent national whistleblowing officer query will now be progressed under the standards. There's more detail in the paper there in relation to the specifics. And the monitor referral that remains under review, we still have no contact from the individual, and we may be closing that off shortly with support from INWO to do that based on the lack of contact, despite contacting the individual several times. So that is the status at the moment, and we note that it is still challenging in relation to the timescales for completing investigations, and a lot of that is to do with the complexity of the processes associated and the cases that are being investigated. So moderate assurance is provided based on the commitment to the principal standards, completed robust investigations, but noting that it's challenging to achieve these within the 20 working days and within the standards.
Thank you, Gareth. Okay, I'm going to open up for questions or comment or anything that people would like to add with regards to the whistleblowing report. I'm not seeing any hands up. I suppose I had a question, Gareth. I suppose since we started doing this, we've seen, I suppose, consistently low volume of numbers in a lot of respects, and I'm imagining that is replicated nationally, given, you know, recognizing that the whistleblowing route is just one of many routes for people to be able to raise concerns. Given that, I'm just interested to understand if there are any conversations nationally about how this reporting is going to look going forward, because I suppose it's really quite challenging, isn't it, to get anything really useful at a strategic level from such low numbers. And I don't know if there have been any discussions about changing the approach or anything happening differently in the future.
In terms of nationally, the independent INWO, to say that instead of the long version, INWO have recently convened a practitioners forum, and they also held a workshop recently around the annual whistleblowing report. Unfortunately, I couldn't make that, clashed. It was very short notice. A number of things came out from INWO and they were very short notice, so I wasn't able to get on to them. So they have really done a sort of, I suppose, a lessons learned element from the whistleblowing the annual reviews, annual reports, which will be coming to the next board meeting for us. And as you know, there's limited number of cases to look at in terms of drawing themes. So I'm not sure whether it will lead to any changes in suggestion of reporting. Unlikely in terms of the requirement to do quarterly reporting. There may be elements of drawing best practice from what boards are doing around in relation to their annual reports. So it will be something we can discuss a bit more at the next board meeting. That will flow through our governance processes with staff governance and come to board for the next meeting. But it's one of the things I've noted in the report, without spoiling the next meeting, is that there are some challenges in drawing inferences from the small number of reports. So yeah, you're completely correct.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. And I suppose just following on from that then, I know when Anne gave her update from staff governance, which was really helpful, and there was reference to the, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but reference to the speaking up action plan. So again, picking up that this is kind of just one option in a suite of things that we have available for staff to be able to raise concerns and speak up. I wonder, Gareth, could you just, and sorry, this is probably slightly repetitive of something that's been discussed at staff governance, but I wonder if you could just say a little bit about what we can do as a board, given the constraints kind of around the formal whistleblowing reporting that we have to do, but more broadly as a board, what we're able to do across the broader set of speaking up metrics and bits of intelligence that we might be gathering, and where we are with that. Thanks.
Yeah. So we've been progressing a conversation through a number of forums, really, but area partnership forums, one of them. So staff side colleagues, but also through a culture oversight group in relation to, I suppose, the journey we've been on in relation to culture and speaking up and a range of improvements. And one of the outstanding, we completed a review of the independent review panel's findings as part of the healing process, just to provide further assurance of the actions that might be outstanding from that. And one of them, two of them, which were discussed at the Culture Oversight Group recently, were in relation to supporting teams and staff that work in small teams, small communities. And the other one was in relation to identifying staff that, teams that may be struggling. And what we agreed, or put forward at Culture Oversight Group, is that this is probably more broadly around being able to identify teams that may be struggling from a number of different perspectives of quality, performance, and recognizing that culture is threaded through all of that. So rather than just looking at it from a staff metrics perspective, staff governance metrics perspective, we are proposing that we would look across a broader range of metrics, and that would tie into the conversations we've had with the board around the quality framework. So being able to use the full suite of metrics to identify, are there any patterns or triggers that we would want to be concerned about that might indicate a team or a service is struggling. So we recognise there's quite a lot of work to do to develop an approach in partnership. So what we agreed at the Culture Oversight Group was we'd establish a subgroup, and we would invite a number of people from different parts of the governance streams, if you like, from staff governance, from clinical governance, clinical care colleagues, so that we start to work to develop that framework and develop it in partnership so that we can all buy into it and own it. So we know where the outputs of that are being used, and as a quality assurance to be able to identify potentially areas that are struggling, that everybody knows how we're doing it and why we're doing it and what support's going to be as a result of doing that. So I suppose it's probably more widely what we want to get towards is more proactive rather than reactive. So what we want is always areas for people to be able to raise concerns, and we've got the Guardian service, which we've referenced today, and also the whistleblowing, as well as routes through the trade unions and staff side. So there are a number of different routes, but I suppose I'd describe them as reactive, where things are going off in the wrong direction potentially, and we want to get a bit more proactive so we can deal with that in a more supportive way, recognising that's a better place to be with our staff. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was great, Gareth, and you answered the question and you did a little bit more as well, so that's good. And I really I welcome that proactive approach that you've just described. I think that sounds really positive, so I'm happy to learn about that. I can see I've got Alex with his hand up, so Alex, I'll bring you in now.
Yeah, you did well, Gareth, because you partly answered my question as well about the proactive bit, which was good. In some respects, I suppose it could be anticipated that the whistleblowing numbers, if you like, would go down in time. Are we seeing a rise in issues being raised through all the other bits, the Guardian service, the normal business, the business as usual, where people are now thinking, well, this is how I go if I've got an issue, rather than going up through the whistleblowing bit? Is that something that we're already seeing, or is that something that's been kept an eye on?
So in response to that, there's probably different sizes of data set that we can look at, and the Another report that will be coming to us is the Guardian Service Annual Report, which is and I haven't got the figures to hand at the moment, but last year was around about 200 contacts through that service, many of which were resolved through support from the Guardian Service, and has been seen as the confidential contacts process has been seen as supportive and welcomed by staff. That has grown over time because of recognition that it's there, but I think it's now we've had it. I'm trying to remember how many years we've had it in place now. It would be difficult to demonstrate that it's plateaued, but it feels like it's probably plateaued around about that level. But that's hard to judge, and you got the variation between different years. So I think we've definitely achieved a positive in terms of people being able to raise concerns through that route, and it's a fairly sizable indication that there's, we've got confidence people can go through that route, and a lot of it is for advice and support and guidance. So sometimes it's better not to use the word concerns, but maybe worries or issues, so it's just putting that context on it. So that's one element of it. There are other metrics that we look at in terms of which we're but they're much smaller data set, and that would be the workforce policies processes. So concerns that go formal in the organisation. But they've remained fairly static over the last few years. They haven't changed significantly, and they're still, as with most boards, a very small percentage of the total workforce size. So it is difficult to draw firm conclusions, but I suppose it's that reactive versus proactive piece. I think we know we've got confidence that if things are not going right, then there are routes for people to report them. I think what we need to do is shift our attention to the proactive piece to actually work with teams proactively in that space.
Thank you, Gareth. And I'm very glad that Bert put his hand up, because I was going to invite Bert, our whistleblowing champion, to see if he wanted to add anything to this conversation. So Bert, I will bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. I was just waiting to allow Gareth to finish his input before I came in. So I agree with all that Gareth has said, and just to touch upon some of the points that have been raised. So in relation to the small numbers, is that reflected across the country? Yeah, I think it probably is. Is there any plans to change reporting mechanisms? I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that these things are constantly being discussed. I think an important thing to bear in mind here is the figures that we're talking about are those which meet the criteria. And what we have heard from Gareth, and what I would reiterate, is there are other routes for things being raised, and that does happen. I think I've said in the recent past that probably from autumn through to maybe springtime, I had quite a high number of approaches from people wanting to have a conversation. And from these conversations, very, very few of them, I could say, met the criteria of whistleblowing, but certainly would have met a need for other interventions, offering support, offering the opportunity for discussions. I've said in the past that I think whistleblowing, the use of the whistleblowing standards, should be probably, in most cases, the last option, because everything should be getting sorted, if it can be sorted, at a much earlier stage. But there will be situations and circumstances where going directly to whistleblowing is the appropriate route in the first instance. It's an important aspect of our work, whistleblowing, and it is very much linked to culture, which Gareth has been talking about. And I think there is much to be done to continue the proactive approach. And one element of that, in my view, is to continue to revisit how we advertise the whistleblowing standards. And that might be through communications, it might be through some of the staff associations, it might be through work in different teams. But hopefully, that summarises my thoughts on this. As I said, I support much of what Gareth has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. No, it's helpful to get that perspective, and I think we've always referenced the fact that work to support an improved culture will always be our job. It'll always be work that we need to continue to focus on. I think you're right. We need to continue to promote the whistleblowing standards and, of course, all the other ways that people can speak up. And I think it's a really positive thing that there are a range of options available for people. And as you said, some will fit into one better than it fits into the other. So I think it's really good that we do have a range of options, and I would encourage people to use the full suite of options available to them to get that advice that they might require, or to speak to somebody when they feel that something isn't right. But absolutely, to pick up the point about the proactive piece again, I really welcome that, and I think absolutely if we can find a way to identify and support teams before things have gone wrong for them, then that's a really, really good thing as well. Okay, that's helpful. I'll just pause and see if anybody else wants to raise any questions or add comment with regards to the whistleblowing report. Right, not seeing any other hands up, so I will just recap there. We were being asked to take moderate assurance from the report, obviously noting the content, that it provides confidence and compliance with the legislation, the policy and the board objectives, but also noting the ongoing work to improve processes. Is everybody happy with that? Lovely jubbly, lots of thumbs up, thank you. Okay, item number 10. This is these are our revisions to standing financial instructions, and I will invite Heleth to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Sarah. So we did want to review the SFIs. Our procurement team asked for some small revisions to be made within section 9.11 around tender thresholds and the value. So we've just suggested that the number of quotes required and the limits are changed slightly. So there's no requirement below 5,000 rather than 1,000. One quote between 5,000 and 25, which was previously 1,000 and 10,000, and then 2 quotes between 25,000 and 50, which was previously 10,000 and 50. And then nothing above that. There's some other small changes within the contract bit as well, but they're mainly wording. And then we took the opportunity to review the SFIs in line with the comments of the last board around strengthening the SFIs around adult social care. So we have included some reference to adult social care. And then I believe within the requirement in the board actions, that ask was a bit wider as well around the plan for adult social care and how that was reflected. Now, they're not reflected directly within the SFIs, but within the wider code of corporate governance. In section A, where it outlines the purpose, role and functions of the board, we do have reference there, which does state that the board, its overall purpose is to work in partnership with Highland Council and Argyll and Bute Integration Joint Board to deliver the strategic commissioning plan and associated outcomes. And then in the further section, there is an element that talks about work in conjunction with Highland Council and Argyll and Bute Integration Joint Board to, no, sorry, wrong section, deliver services as commissioned by the Highland Council and the Argyll and Bute Integration Board in line with the agreed health and social care implementation strategic commissioning plan. So there's reference to both strategic plan and the implementation plan, which I think then was the ask around the framework to then have the procurement and tendering supporting the commissioning plan. So I hope that that's all reflected and it it satisfies the requirements of the board action.
Thanks, Helle. So quite a technical piece, but important. I will just check in. I know there've been a lot of discussions around this behind the scenes, but we'll just check in for comments and questions. Jerry, I'll bring you in, please.
Yes, just to say, Sarah, I think I was one of the people who raised that issue when we saw the drafts, and having seen what Helle has proposed, I am content with what we now have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. That's good. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So just to highlight what we're being asked here. So we're being asked to take substantial assurance from the report that Helle has provided. We are being asked to approve the revisions to the standing financial instructions as recommended by the audit committee, and we are being asked to note that a fully revised version of the SFIs will be incorporated into the Code of Corporate Governance, and that will be uploaded to the website once it's fully agreed. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, great. Thank you very much. That takes us on to item number 11. So this is our corporate risk register, and I will invite Boyd to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chair. This is standard paper in the usual format, and for this board meeting, the summary paper presents a summary of the risks identified as belonging to NHS Highland's risk register, which is housed on Datix. Furthermore, the target risk levels and target risk numerical scores for each of the board risks have now been added to allow oversight on the level of risk exposure that the organisation is prepared to tolerate following completion of all mitigating actions. And you will see that in the paper, and I would hope therefore that helps. From the start of today's board meeting, the action around showing scoring and sorry, my messages keep pinging. The actions that show scoring, I hope it will be deemed complete. In terms of the actual risks presented, the 23-24 financial risk has been closed off by the FRPC, and you can see the detail of that in the paper, and a new risk has been added for this current financial year, which gives detail of not just the risk, but of the mitigations and plans around that risk at our board level. Again, it's a financial risk, and it may be that my colleague Helle Cooper will assist if there are any questions with that. That's really the headlines of the paper today, and I maybe will pause at that point, Chair, for any questions or items to raise on it.
Thank you, Boyd. That's great. Helle.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify, so the finance risk for 23-24, we haven't closed at this time, subject to audit. So once we've gone through audit and hopefully had a clear audit, we'll close it at that point. So we do have the two financial risks at the moment, and hopefully the new risk reflects the conversation that we've had earlier on in the meeting around the finance plan.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, thanks, Boyd. I like it. I like the look of it. I like that target score going in. That is great, very beneficial. One thing that does appear, and it appears very clear, is that in some cases we've not got far to go to get from where we are to the target score. In some cases we've got an awful long way to go, and that in itself shows how challenging it is. In some cases you've got due date, but there isn't a due date. There's a narrative in it, and that's fine. I can understand why that is, but it is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Particularly is some of the things where you've got a score of. I'll give you the example there of the staff governance risk. There's one of 20, the target score is 9. There's another one that was 20, the target score was 8. That is a long way to take risk down. So we've got to accept the fact that is challenging and it will not be done overnight. Nothing like it. As a mate of mine used to say, that is not the work of an afternoon, and that certainly isn't. But thanks anyway.
Thanks, Chair. And just to comment on that, risk's always dynamic. It's always, when you get to scoring, there's a judgment involved as well. But I guess where you see a dissonance between target and actual assessed, that helps to understand that perhaps there's need for greater effort with existing mitigations or development of further mitigations. And I guess that the key thing about risk isn't always the recording of what the risk is, it's the understanding what the actions, the controls and mitigations might be. What are the things that can be put in place to address the risk is probably the greatest, most important element of risk management practice.
Thank you both. I've got Gareth next.
Yeah, I think it's probably also important to highlight that some risks are we have the mitigations are within the gift, our own gift, if that makes sense, and some we have less control over, and we'll have to, I suppose, make a judgment on whether we're doing enough as a board with what's within our gift. But in terms of workforce availability, we use that as an example. That's a problem across the whole of NHS Scotland. There's a labour market shortage, so there's elements of that. Will it ever come down at this point in time due to our actions? Possibly not, but we can demonstrate that we're doing the best we can in terms of strategic actions to try and address that risk.
Thanks, Gareth. And I'll bring Anne in next, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Just a couple of questions. I wondered if Boyd could set out for us the appropriate relationship between our risk appetite and the target scores in the paper, and if there is a relationship, whether those target scores have been refreshed or reconsidered in the light of the recent refresh of the risk appetite. And secondly, it was just a question in relation to the new proposed financial risk. I just wondered if the rating for that should be very high rather than high, or maybe that's something to be discussed at FRP, but just something that struck me when I read that. Thanks.
So I'll come in on the first one, and Health may want to come on the second point. I think with any risk appetite statement, it will take a while to see a tangible difference. In fact, I've had it reported that you don't always notice something that you can measure. However, all execs are involved in drawing up the risks, and indeed the chairs of governance committees also. And I would be hopeful that the risk appetite work, which for the board was considerable over 18 months, will have informed us as we now look at existing and new risks. So I think there will be some measure of influence from it, but as to how you would measure it, I don't think we've fully determined that. As we further develop our risk education through the organisation, the risk appetite will be something that's touched on as part of the information share, and it will undoubtedly be of influence elsewhere as well. And there are some pieces of risk-related work where we can perhaps test that out as some changes are made over the coming 6 months.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know, Heleth, if you wanted to pick up that second bit. Thanks, Heleth.
Yeah, thank you. I guess scoring risks are a little bit subjective, but the thought behind that one, and that it's not at maximum, is the impact of not delivering the financial position, doesn't cause risk to life or limb. I guess where it does potentially is if we were to deliver. So there's that balance, isn't there, of what 5 means, and at the moment it doesn't feel like we're at the 5 stage. That might change throughout the year, and actually our risk around finance might deteriorate rather than improve. But this is about the delivery of the financial position and the impact of not delivering that financial position, and I'm not sure that would quite satisfy the requirements of a 5 scoring.
Okay, Thanks, Heleth. That's really helpful. And I suppose I'm mindful back to the earlier conversation around risk associated with the various elements of the financial plan, and the fact that there's going to be a lot happening in the next few months, and I suppose how we consider and update our various risk registers to reflect those developments will be really important, and then how we take those through our governance structures appropriately will be critical. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, no other questions, or oh, sorry, my Teams is just having a little moment now. It's trying to join me into another call. I don't want to do that. Hang on. Alex.
Yeah, sorry to labour the point, Heleth, but I agree about the impact, but I would have thought the probability was 5. So I would have said it was a 5 times 4, not a 4 times 5. Because I think we know that we've already agreed that the budget is going to be, well, could give us a deficit of 22 and a bit million. So to get to the actual brokerage cap, I don't think we're going to make it. That's why I'm saying I think if we're going to argue about the score, then I would have said it was 20 because it was a 5 times 4, not a 4 times 4. Well, that's me being pedantic. Sorry.
That's okay. Hello.
Thank you. Happy to take this conversation offline, Alec, and maybe to discuss it in detail through FRP committee. But I guess nothing's a certainty, is it? When we look at the last financial year's position and going down from a projected deficit of 70 million down to 30, then that's a significant movement. So I don't think that we can say with absolute certainty that we won't deliver that brokerage cap. So I think there is leeway, which is why I've reflected that in the 4 score, but more than happy to debate that further.
Thanks, Heleth. And I think I was going to say anyway, I think there's, as I said, there's a piece of work, isn't there, about how this is going to unfold over the coming months. And I would absolutely anticipate, Alex, that within FRP, there's going to have to be some quite sort of detailed discussion around the risks that you hold within your committee and how those are reflected. So I think that is a job which I'll happily hand over to you, Alex, to take through the committee, and then we can reflect that up through the board in due course. Okay. Right, so just checking. We are being Sarah's being asked to find the right paper first. We are being asked to take substantial assurance from the report, note the content of the report, and that provides confidence of compliance with our legislation, policy and board objectives, and examine and consider the evidence provided, giving final decision on the risks that are recommended as per the paper. So obviously, given the fact that we've talked about what we need to do going forward, is everybody happy with that at the moment? Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us on then to item number 12. Sorry, these are our Governance Committee annual reports. So I will invite Ruth to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Sarah, and apologies everybody, I've had terrible connectivity today, so if you don't mind, I will leave my camera off. So yes, the Governance Committee annual reports have been agreed by the individual governance committees and were endorsed at the last meeting of the Audit Committee last week. So the report draws attention to the fact that the governance committees have reviewed their terms of reference during November and December and January this last time, and your memberships were also refreshed and reviewed. It also highlights that Remuneration Committee's annual report was circulated to your meeting yesterday, and I confirm that that was agreed yesterday. So there's no change to the version that's in your papers there today. So this is a standard report offering substantial assurance. To note that they've been agreed by the Audit Committee and invite the board to approve them because they form part of the evidence in support of the board's annual accounts governance statement.
That's great. Thank you, Ruth. Happy to take questions, comments. Obviously, committee chairs will be very familiar with their own reports, but happy if anybody wants to ask across anything from those. Oh, okay, super. So we are being asked to take substantial assurance from the report. Note that the reports were all approved by the Audit Committee on the 21st of May and approve those annual reports, which form the key part of the evidence for our annual accounts. Are we happy with that? Yes, lovely. Okay, next we have item number 13. So this is our annual report with regards to the Community Empowerment Act. And Ruth, again, for you, please.
Thank you. Yes. So this is inviting the board to approve the annual reports relating to asset transfers and to public participation requests under the Community Empowerment Act. So over the last year, we didn't receive any asset transfer applications throughout the year, but nonetheless, we did progress an application from a previous year relating to property at Ian Charles Hospital in Granton-on-Spey. We also reached agreement to lease land at the rear of Badenoch and Strathspey Community Hospital during this last year. We didn't receive any public participation requests either during last financial year, but you'll be aware that we actively engage with our communities about our services and developments. Nonetheless, despite the fact that we didn't receive any applications, we've made some updates to our website and improvements to accessibility for both asset transfers and public participation requests. The application form is now fully online. It can be available in large print, and we've offered assistance to anybody or any group that would otherwise not be able to complete the form. So the board's asked to take assurance and approve the annual reports for submission to Scottish Government. And I should say as well, these annual reports are uploaded to our web once they're agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And I just wanted to comment to say I really welcome the work to make that information more available and easier for communities to engage with. I think that's really positive. Happy to take any questions or comments. No, okay, so we're being asked to take substantial assurance from those reports and approve those. Are we happy with that? Lovely. And then we have 14, I'm sorry, Ruth, it's yourself again. We have our register of members' interests.
Thank you, Sarah. So this is primarily to confirm that we've done the annual update of your registers of interests and it's now available on the web. So it's for information and to confirm that that's taken place.
That's great. Thank you, Ruth. I'm not anticipating any, but anybody have anything they want to raise before we note that? Lovely. Okay. So you've done very well today. We're ahead of schedule, but I will pause a moment and see if anybody has any other competent business they wish to raise. No, okay. So just to confirm the date and time of our next meeting. So that will be on the 25th of June, 9:30, same place. Thank you everybody for your time today. It never hurts to recognise the huge amount of work that goes into bringing a board meeting together and the time needed by members both during the meeting and indeed to prepare. So thank you very much everybody for your efforts. It's much appreciated and I hope you have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.